Thank you so much, Ian. I'm thrilled to be here. So I'll just start my introduction by saying, in the context of Women's History Month, it's particularly fitting that Sally Jewell is our keynote speaker for this evening. Sally has long been one of our local leaders and heroes, and as Secretary of the Interior under President Obama, she's made national history as well. Her career has been meteoric, from engineering to the banking industry to the CEO of REI, which consistently was named one of the best companies to work for in the country. As Interior Secretary, among many priorities, Sally focused on science-based land and water conservation, and also focused on working with Native American tribes to protect their sovereignty and develop their resources to become more self-reliant. More recently, Sally served as the interim CEO of the Nature Conservancy and helped shape EarthLab, a new institute at the University of Washington designed to connect students with local partners to solve environmental problems. Sally has always had a visionary eye on the future and her feet firmly on the ground. And I know from my experience with her, you cannot outwork Sally Jewell. Everything she does is with commitment and passion. And did I mention she's climbed the tallest peak in Antarctica and also climbed Mount Rainier 7 times? We are greatly honored to have Sally agree to talk with us this evening, knowing she is acutely aware of the critical international intersection of climate change, rural agriculture, and food security. These issues reflect her own deep interest in the future of the planet and her love of humanity. So with that, I turn the program over to Sally Jewell.
Thank you, Jennifer, for that kind introduction, and more importantly, for all of the work that you've done over the years for Landesa and for so many other organizations to alleviate global poverty. You're just the best. And thank you, Ian, for your skillful facilitation of this evening. I just want to begin by congratulating Jim Piggott on being awarded the Prosterman Award. You're in very good company with Jill Ruckelshaus and the late Bill Gates Sr., and I know all of you join with Roy Prosterman in your determination to alleviate poverty around the world. So thank you very much and congratulations, Mr. Piggott. I also want to acknowledge the dedicated employees of Landesa from around the world for your work on land rights with Indigenous people and local communities. It makes a big difference, and I appreciate your work, and I know that the audience joins me in wanting to support your terrific efforts. So in this photo, Chris Jochnick is receiving the 2017 Loy Che Wu Prize for World Civilization on behalf of Landesa. I know what that feels like. When I was interim CEO of the Nature Conservancy in 2019, 2 years after Landesa, that organization received the same prize. And it's a big deal. In the video tribute to Landesa at that event, Roy Prosterman reflected on the 50 years of progress since Landesa's founding, impacting the lives of 150 million people. And he said he thought it would take another 50 years to complete the job. And I deeply appreciate his optimism, and I sincerely hope that he's right. So I'm a fan of Landesa and have been really since just after 9/11. Bill Clapp pulled together a group of leaders, including Bill Gates Sr. and Bill Ruckelshaus and several others, to create an organization. Well, actually first to educate the community and then to create an organization which became known as the Initiative for Global Development, and its inaugural director was Jennifer Potter, who you heard from earlier this evening. In educating the business community in this region, they brought multiple speakers, and one of those speakers was Hernando de Soto from Peru, who talked about something that I was not aware of, which was the extra-legal economy, people that make their way in this world without land rights. And that really stuck with me. I saw up front, as Secretary of the Interior, this in the United States as well. I saw it in places like Puerto Rico, where a lot of the cities are built outside of the legal economy. I saw it on Indian reservations, where hundreds of years of failed government policies nibbled away at lands that had been provided to Indians, along with a number of swindlers that helped to do that, leaving so many of the indigenous people of this country unable to provide for their people. So these challenges happen even in the world's largest economy. And it illustrates that government policies really matter, for good or for not good. We also are living in a time when the world is witnessing rapid challenges and changes to our climate. There's more severe storms, there's droughts, there's floods, there's wildfires, and wild fluctuations from historical norms and temperature. These are a couple of pictures that I want to show from back-to-back storms from just this last year that slammed into Nicaragua and Honduras before hitting some of the same parts of Louisiana in a row a few days later. And it's a stark reminder of the risk and the very real climate refugee situation that faces both regions, especially for people who lack clear land ownership. So these examples from last year and many more illustrate how our world's most vulnerable people are also the most impacted by climate change. We also see some encouraging news. The world, fortunately, is awakening. Just a couple of headlines for you. There's growing momentum around the world for protecting 30% of the world's most important habitat by 2030. 30 by 30, it's called. And that addresses imbalances in our ecosystems that are driving species extinction, while also challenging food security both on land and in our oceans. But we have advanced mapping capabilities these days where we can witness what's happening, and we can see that the most intact ecosystems are owned and stewarded by indigenous people who have lived in harmony with the world's lands and waters from the equator to the highest latitudes. We have a lot to learn from them. So as we witness the acceleration of species loss from fragmentation and destructive development of critical ecosystems, we're awakening to the importance of taking bold action. As this UN report shows, governments and businesses are stepping up their commitments and their timelines to reach net zero carbon emissions, as celebrated by the UN, with a lot more work to do. Businesses also are becoming increasingly aware of their role in protecting the planet and the risks that they take to inaction. Investors are holding them accountable for environmental, social, and governance practices. We now see large agribusinesses partnering with indigenous people and local communities in places like Brazil and China on regenerative agriculture and bringing back damaged lands. So to address current challenges, we've got to align the interests of our planet with the interests of people. And that means providing examples to government on how their policies can help shape land use in a way that supports their economies, the health of their people, and the health of the ecosystems on which all life depends. So organizations oftentimes work alongside indigenous people and local communities to understand what works and to advocate with governments to support policies. And this is exactly what Landesa has done for 5 decades. You can see in this picture from India. Land ownership is key. The ability to provide for family health and security, not just now, but in generations forward. So policies that support sustainable agriculture, that facilitate local production of value-added products especially, and the ability to sell them through reliable and fair markets are all important aspects. So I want to share with you a few examples from my time as Secretary of the Interior and my time leading the Nature Conservancy. And the first of those is on a trip that I took in 2016 to work with several governments on combating the scourge of illegal wildlife trafficking, which is a global transnational crime problem. So in the 3 African countries that I visited, each faced different challenges. But as it turns out, those were really driven by different land ownership structures. So in all countries, when a local African farmer or community member can earn the equivalent of a year's wages by leading a poacher to a rhino or an elephant, it's tempting to break the law and take the wildlife. But healthy wildlife is also critical to their local economy. So the most encouraging example I saw was in Kenya, the Northern Rangelands Trust. And here, Land Conservancy partnered with local communities to ensure that villagers could support their families while also living in harmony with wildlife that's so vital to their tourism economy. So here's a map of the Northern Rangelands Trust, and it is a group of 39 land conservancies covering 42,000 square kilometers, representing 18 different ethnic groups, who many times were not as friendly with each other as one might like. The objective is to align the economic and security interests of these people with conservation and ecosystem health. And support has been provided to them through organizations like TNC and many others, as well as multiple governments, including USAID and the European Union. So together, these conservancies have put 3,000 people to work in restoring 7,000 hectares of degraded lands. They have prevented 96% of elephant poaching that would otherwise have taken place on conservancy lands. And they have launched sanctuaries to restore populations of several endangered species, including in this photo where I'm visiting a rhino sanctuary during my visit with Judy Wakungu, who was the Minister of the Environment for Kenya. And these community conservation efforts have benefited nearly 70,000 people from indigenous people and indigenous and local communities in the area, including providing 1,300 direct jobs working for the conservancies. So climate change is impacting this region as it is everywhere else, particularly through changes in the weather. But the collective efforts to restore ecosystem health through more sustainable practices will help these communities adapt to changes on the landscape. And that's something they're motivated to do as landowners with secure tenure. So my next example takes us all the way across the globe to the Maya Selva region of North and Central America, a region critical to our planet's health and in the bullseye of pressures from development and climate change. This is a picture that I took in 2019 flying across the Yucatan on a board of directors trip with the Nature Conservancy to Mexico. And the pressures of encroachment from agriculture, particularly industrial agriculture, were visible everywhere out the airplane window. The Mayan forests are critical habitat to many native species, including jaguar, and they're very effective carbon sinks of global importance. They're threatened by large animal forms and industrial agriculture, which, because of runoff and the limestone substrate, threaten directly water quality as well as ecosystem health. They're also in the bullseye of hurricanes that are intensifying rapidly in the warm waters over the Gulf of Mexico. So they bear the brunt of multiple storms, including these pictures of Hurricane Dean, which was a devastating Category 5 direct hit that wreaked havoc on the area in 2007. It's also home to indigenous Mayan people and local communities of Spanish descent, with rich cultural resources that are important to protection, as well as a source of ecotourism revenue for local businesses. So while the government of Mexico holds title to the land, communities are organized around ejidos. And these ejidos provide reliable local land rights to communities for sustainable use of the land, including forestry and agriculture. So we visited the ejido of Nobec, and in this photo you can see several men from the village explain the map behind them, showing the family farms, communal farms, and the shared forests where they practice sustainable forestry. Villagers host gatherings of tourists or visitors like ourselves who are visiting local Mayan cultural sites, and that activity provides additional sources of income to the village. And here a village leader took us into the forest where this ejido has achieved Forest Stewardship Council or FSC certification for the timber that they produce, committing to maintaining forest health while also sustainably harvesting trees for their small sawmill that they invested in. So through the sawmill, they're able to provide value-added products, high-end products like the furniture that you see and this kind of cool xylophone, to sell into places like hotels and homes in Cancun and other tourist destinations, as opposed to taking these valuable FSC certified logs and selling them into the open market at a fraction of the price. These products end up being more valuable and more attractive with the FSC certification, ensuring forest health, sustainable harvesting that supports the village economy. So both of the examples from Africa and from Central and North America, and so many of the projects that Landesa champions, become part of this essential vision of land rights and natural resources governance as a climate resilience strategy. We're proving up a concept can create a pathway to shape government policies that enables these examples to become scalable. So in the Northern Rangelands Trust in Kenya and the Maya Selva region in Mexico, we see landscapes and local communities that are under threat from unsustainable practices and the impacts of climate change. And we see Indigenous people and local communities with land rights create a sustainable future for themselves and their families that they would like to see passed on to future generations. So this is a Landesa graphic. It provides a visual depiction of how Landesa's implementation of local policies is essential in shaping responsible national policies and global goals to address climate resilience. It's really a virtuous cycle where globally consistent data helps countries learn what works, which is ground truthed by the results of local projects. And it also helps national governments understand how their policies help them meet international targets while also being responsible to local needs. And everybody learns in this process. So in my 4 years as a public servant, I came to understand that it is far more difficult to lead in government than it is to run a business. Public servants, by definition, serve the public, and that includes people across the political and the economic spectrum. And it really is about listening to different points of view, different perspectives, genuinely and honestly, and finding common ground. And I found there always was common ground. People want a place that's going to be healthy for their families over the long term. And that is really critical in shaping laws and policies that will stick. Experimenting at a local level, like the two examples I just provided and those that Landesa champions, are critically important in helping governments at every level, local to federal, to international, frankly, understand how they can create durable and predictable policies to incent the right kinds of behaviors that align economic interests with environmental needs. And if we do this right, we'll have the best chance possible of shaping a trajectory that is both just and sustainable for our shared planet. So I want to wrap up my remarks with just a few reasons why your support for Landesa is so important at this time in history. In Indonesia, some of the world's most important ecosystems have been destroyed to make way for palm oil plantations. So that's a decision we now know has had devastating unintended consequences. Landesa is working with the government to return land to local and indigenous communities, enabling them to restore forest ecosystems and sustainable agriculture. In China, Landesa is researching land tenure, especially for women, and how it can dovetail into China's commitments to adaptation and mitigation of climate change, as well as their interest in long-term protection of important ecological regions, including a plan to establish a national park system. In Myanmar, a region with governance challenges right now, indigenous people are planting mangrove forests to restore ecosystem health that support fish habitat, and mangroves are great little fish nurseries that support local fishers and food supplies, as well as buffering storms and helping adjust to sea level rise. So Landesa expects the lessons learned here will be applied to the Bay of Bengal and around the world. So let's just say Landesa punches above its weight. It shines a spotlight on the importance of engaging indigenous people and local communities through land rights to shape a future where hundreds of millions, I hope billions, of people become part of the solution in addressing climate change. It provides tangible, measurable examples to reduce the risk to governments in shaping sustainable policies. It partners with others to leverage its impact, and it helps shape that path forward internationally by participating actively with organizations like the United Nations to shape their policies that will help support healthy people and a healthy planet at this time of climate change. So thank you for the opportunity to be with you this evening. Please join me in supporting this amazing organization to help realize Roy's vision to address these challenges in the coming 50 years. Thanks so much, and Ian, I'll turn it back to you.